Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, we'll get to the news, but first, you were on the road again this week. Where were you and what was the event?
I was up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, actually working with some advisors to do some advisor training. So, we often train other financial advisors, believe it or not, around the country on, and my specific there is getting to understand how to do proactive tax planning, in particular for retirees, so that they don't overpay, as unfortunately most Americans do.
Well, good. That's dangerously close to Michigan, where we were talking about that last week or the week before, that they're throwing people in jail for offending people. So, but you skirted Michigan and were safely in Wisconsin there. Well, good. David, a couple weeks ago, Michael Luna of our Property and Casualty Division, Smart Protection, was in here to talk to you about, I think it was events transpiring in California, but apparently this is becoming a national phenomenon where it's becoming almost untenable for home insurance businesses to stay in business. Here's the headline from the Epic Times. Major insurance company pulls out of Florida. What's going on, David?
They simply are doing what they do. Insurance companies are risk management organizations, and they see it to be an untenable market to continue insuring houses in places. And it's not because it's a coastal city. It's not hurricanes. It's the untenable cost to replace if they were to get a claim. House burns down, gets struck by lightning. We saw this in California. It's simply the actual replacement cost far exceeds the market value.
The economics aren't working anymore.
Correct.
It's not Mother Nature. It's
Right.
not weather.
Because of all the supply chain disruption, because of the labor costs today to get competent professionals to show up and do work. If someone were to have their house burned to the ground, basically, if their house was worth, say, $800,000 in Central Florida, it would that's what the market value is right now. Like if you were to list it, the actual cost to rebuild that house on average is about 16% higher than that. So in other words, it cost that company over $930,000 to build it back. So therefore, they're either going to force your premiums even higher,
Sure,
and people are pushing back on that, or they're going to just say we can't afford to do this. And so there's each state's insurance regulators put caps on how far you can put the insurable value at a house, et cetera. And I don't pretend to know the exact numbers in Florida there, but it's just become an untenable market for a lot of insurers. And for those of you that don't know, Florida's been a very challenging market for home insurers for a while now. Back in 2004, we had 4 major landfalls come through with 4 hurricanes and Francis, Charlie, et cetera. That was a really, really rough year. And after that, most of your large insurers you would know, like USAA, Allstate, State Farm, all pulled out of the state. And so basically what's happened is the state has helped subsidize some of these insurers to stay in the marketplace, and they created their own called Citizens. It's basically an insurance company backed by the state of Florida. And then they almost create these new insurance companies and give them to a certain amount of risk, like $1 billion, and then cap them off and then create another and another and another. Well, they can't stay in business. They're not profitable. And so now we're going to actually talk. I think Sean's coming on the next segment to talk about Ron DeSantis, but this could be dangerous for the state of Florida's finances, because basically in the story we were talking about, the chief financial of the state of Florida say, hey, we're going to hold you accountable if you pull out here and it costs us fiscal money. Well, the insurance company's a for-profit entity, Chip.
They're not charities.
They have to
They're
operate
doing
with a
business.
profit, or
They
they
gotta
can't
make money.
Well, they can't pay their employees. They can't pay their property tax.
Yeah.
So this is just the start of this. You're going to see this. And folks, listen, I know we had Michael Luna on here recently 2 weeks ago. Pay attention to your renewal rates. You may be shocked right here in Omaha what your insurance is. If your house is worth over $500,000 and you're still paying less than $4,000 for your homeowner's insurance, you might be in for quite a shock when you get your next renewal bill. And this is just the type of the marketplace that we're having. Again, we'll have time to go in today, but you're going to see innovation in the market, higher deductibles. And by the way, in Florida, your minimum deductible for a hurricane is 2%. So if you have a $500,000 house, that's a $10,000 deductible you're carrying, and they still can't afford to insure you. So not good news.
David, speaking of the housing market, Fox Business headline, U.S. home prices still face a steep and sustained decline this year. Is that the way you see it?
I don't see it being a steep decline. I do see it being a decline. We've been talking about this for a while. As interest rates are slowing down the purchasing power of people to buy homes, there are still transactions taking place. And what you're going to see is certain markets, and we've seen this in like Phoenix. We've talked about it in San Francisco, places where prices went up over 20% a year for 2 or 3 years in a row. Those are correcting already as we speak. But in a lot of markets, you can expect the prices to drop 10%. I don't call that a crash. That's just that's a correction, and it's healthy for the housing market. Every once in a while, we go through these cycles, if you will. But the problem in real estate is not single family housing. It's slowing down, and that's why you're going to see this. And then whenever the Fed is done, we think you're going to see a rate hike next week. About a year out, you're going to see them go the other way. Probably not until then to get this inflation under. But once those rates start to come down, people that feel trapped, that were planning on downsizing into retirement or upsizing, right? You're a growing family, you got married, and it was just you two of you. Now you have kids, and you want to buy that bigger house in the suburbs. You people can't do it because they're trapped in a 3.5% mortgage today, and mortgage rates are almost twice that. So that when rates do come down, they're going to take that as event, and inventory is going to come to market, and that flood of inventory will hold prices down and suppress them. And like I said, on my neighborhood, we've already seen 10% drops in people that have listed their homes.
We're going to have a question about that in our Q&A about a mortgage rate and whether to stay with it. But I think I've heard you explain also, David, not only are there variations from market to market, but it's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. It depends on what kind of house you have, too. Is it a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom? Is it 4? Is it 5? That makes a big difference as well.
And I own real estate of all shapes and sizes, right? And 2-bedroom houses are a very specific market. So before you go buy a 2-bedroom house, these are typically retirees that buy these. They usually have their bedroom and a guest bedroom for a kid to visit type of thing, and they're built in certain marketplaces. Like in the South, they're what's called patio homes. I own some of these. My parents live in one. They're very common because they're just low maintenance. They're not massive. They're just what you need, so to speak. And so those become popular, but you're not going to sell that to a family with 3 kids, right? So the 3-bedroom is the standard 3-2 in America, right? And then even 4 and 5-bedroom homes are very unique markets that are selling to people that need them. Like you and Pam had 7 kids, so when you needed like me, a larger house, a few
bedrooms,
and I have it just because my kids have people crash with us all the time. but so there's different markets and a lot of different factors that go into the price in homes in general. But yes, in general, housing prices are softening, but a crash is a bit harsh in my opinion. Now, commercial real estate, as far as office space, that's something we could talk about another time. That may crash.
I want to hit you with 2 headlines, David, and I have a feeling you might have some pushback on these. One's from the Wall Street Journal. It says economists are cutting back their recession expectations. And then this one from the Epic Times, small business optimism rises, but inflation concerns remain persistent. There are voices out there, David, that are backing off, that are saying maybe it isn't going to be so bad after all in 2023.
Yeah, sure. Well,
you're not. I didn't think you would be buying in this market.
Well, so we literally just got out July's what's called U.S. Empire Manufacturing Index. That slowed to 1.1. A plus 1.1. That was 6.6 just in June. So that's a big contraction. We're seeing the PMIs fall off a cliff, not only here, but across the globe. We just saw China miss on their CPI, on their GDP. So China just missed by a big percentage on their GDP, and they have more youth, those under 30 years old, unemployed than ever in their history in China right now. And just so you know, the last time they cycled up where they had unemployment, China had unrest. It led to the Tiananmen Square incident. So, you can only placate people for so long, but then social unrest comes to a country that doesn't have economic viability for its inhabitants, and younger people are obviously more prone to do the protest, et cetera. But no, I know they're trying to get rosy here and try to sell this idea that we're getting a soft landing. But again, if you just look at the markets, and the S&P 500 got us north of 17% up for the year. But again, as I talk about in advisor training, 7 stocks are over 91% of that return. There is no broadening in the economy. Normally, we see when bull markets reestablish, you see a sector or two break out, right? They're the leaders, if you will. But then you quickly see within 90 to 180 days widening out breadth where more and more areas and sectors of the economy are growing. And that's just not true. We have 7 of the 14 Morningstar sectors negative year to date, even though the market's up. And so the economy is not doing well.
You have been saying for weeks and even months, technically, on the surface level, numbers look good, but the underlying fundamentals are very suspect and eventually are going to collapse.
Well, until we get the employment situation is changing right before our eyes. So we've had a pretty strong labor market, and that's why they're saying this in some of these interviews that, but we're still, if you just go out and about, now hiring everywhere, people can't get people to show up to do the jobs that they're requesting them to do. But we're also seeing jobs being cut now, and it's a little faster pace, and we're seeing job openings. We've talked about over 1 million jobs in the last 2 months have disappeared from the job openings report. So this tells me that we are fading here into a negative time, and I believe a recession is imminent. Now, they won't call it until 2024 at this point, but it's coming.
Don't get caught flat-footed. Get the complimentary report card. 402-369-7777. There's no charge, there's no obligation. This is a comprehensive review of your entire financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make some changes. Now is the time to find out, and we will provide recommendations on what we think you ought to do going forward. The complimentary report card, 402-369-7777. 402-369-7777. Up next, it's time for another visit with our go-to guy on Social Security, financial advisor Sean Swanson. He's up next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Joining us this week is a financial advisor at Retire Smart who is our go-to guy on Social Security. David, please introduce our special guest.
Yeah, thank you, Chip. And back in the studio once again is our Social Security guru, if you will, one of our lead financial advisors here at Retire Smart, Mr. Sean Swanson. Thanks for taking time to come in this week.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we've got another round of one of our most popular classes, at least it has been all year long. You've had standing room only a couple of nights. We've had to bring chairs from the kitchen into the event center and what have you, because you've got so many people requesting to be there. So when are the next set of classes? I know they're coming right up here.
Yep, coming up Tuesday and Thursday, August 1st and August 3rd here in the Midwest Learning Center.
And those are at 6:30 p.m., right?
Correct, yep.
So if you would like to come, you can get registered. You can call now, 402-369-7777. Again, those do that is literally our most popular class, and there's so many decisions to make when it comes to Social Security. I think a lot of people get stunned when they find out there's actually over 500 different combinations of how you could draw Social Security, especially if you're married.
Absolutely.
So it could be mind-boggling stuff. So speaking of Social Security, unfortunately, it looks like we don't have the official number. We won't get that actually until the end of September, but looks like the COLA adjustment, that's the cost of living adjustment for Social Security. We've had really good success with those the last couple of years because of these inflationary times. Inflation is still running. Core inflation is almost 5%, 28 months over 5%. But you're telling me the COLA this year is not going to come close to that.
It's not. In fact, we'll not know for here a couple more months, but 2.7, David, is what it's looking like it'll be. So for most consumers, it'll feel like they're losing ground with inflation still being higher than that.
That's below the average. Just so you know, since Social Security's been in inception, 2.8 is the average. So you're talking a below average adjustment when core inflation is still well above over 200% of the Fed's target. That's interesting. So, and of course, the reason is how they tweak the calculator behind the scenes to come up with this COLA adjustment. I always remind people there's a vested interest in anyone doing accounting for the government and to suppress CPI and COLA adjustments because they have to make these not only for Social Security retirees, but those in the railroad system, those on military pensions or GSA pensions, et cetera. So anyway, that not great news, I guess, based on we still think real inflation for most people is significantly higher.
That's right.
So inside of or other than that bit of not so great news, we've seen a myriad of politicians out there now. You have mainly on the Republican side of the aisle, several declared politicians, and none of them are really getting much traction other than Trump, obviously. And we know Ron DeSantis, who's been a very strong governor. In fact, he's rated, I think, as the number one governor by most metrics right now in America. He's obviously in the ring, but he had the wherewithal to at least be honest and come out recently and talk about he would propose changes to Social Security, which is not a popular thing to do when you're running for office.
That's right. It could actually be a really good thing for him. He might be rewarded for his bravery, David, or he might be punished because he brought up what is sometimes called the third rail of American politics, meaning that if you do anything to scare people about Social Security, you can write off your political career. Well, what he was floating out as an idea, I think mathematically is sound. For anyone that's born in 1960 or later, their full retirement age is currently 67. And what Governor DeSantis is floating out there, changing that mathematically to potentially age 69. So that means people like you and I, born after 1960, our full retirement age would be 2 years later. Mathematically, that provides some stability to the system, but it's not always the most popular thing to bring up.
Well, so here's my problem with what he did there is, again, he's at least proposing something that could get the solvency there. Now, first and foremost, there's a lot of fear mongers that go out there and tell, Social Security's out of money in 10 years. That is not the case. But the trust fund, the way they manage it, would run out of reserves.
Correct.
And therefore, because they're actually taking in, there's reserves, and they're taking in less dollars today than they pay out. That's been happening for a couple of years now. So we're sending out more money in monthly checks than we're currently taking in. So what we want to do is obviously control the flow of those dollars going out, hence the COLA adjustments, et cetera. I do not believe that anybody born prior to 1965, that would include the entire baby boom generation, should have their benefits changed in any way. And the reason is there's statistical data to prove when they went to work, right? And so they've been paying in the system longer. Now, I am, as you mentioned, born after 1960, but I'm also born after 1965. I'm okay if they move my benefit, but somebody just 3 years older than me, I disagree with that simply because there's a big generational shift from the basically born after 1965, you're into our generation, Gen X, and we're much smaller, less than half of us as there are baby boomers. And so the system won't feel quite the strain with so many of us, but if they delay us, that gets them some really good meat on the hook, so to speak, to be able to keep paying these bills. The other thing is I would actually push it to 70, everybody born after 1980. In other words, we've only made one adjustment in the history of Social Security, and that was in 1983.
True.
And it was Ronald Reagan, a conservative president, that pushed out full retirement age. And people are like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. Part of the deal to get the tax rate from 70 to 28 was we had to give in. And by the way, it's also why you pay tax on Medicare Part B.
Ouch.
But anyway, that's the old-fashioned governing where we reach across the aisle and something could get done. And we just don't seem to have that in politics. Now, as you said, it's the third rail for the last 20, 25 years of politics. So I don't know if this kills his chances in the primaries or not, but at least he's willing to have a real conversation. One of the things I talk about just in politics in general, I love watching Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a Republican candidate, because he just has logical answers to things. And even Robert Kennedy Jr. on the Democratic side, he's at least willing to console that, hey, logically, this doesn't make sense. Now, people I know have all kinds of issues with him for various reasons. But again, I want to get back to where there's conversations of solving the problem. I don't care about party or person. I talk about all the time. What is the policy that they will enact, and how will that affect you and I and our clients and constituents, et cetera? So basically, Ron is being somewhat logical, would you say?
Yeah, and also I'd love to just ask a follow-up question though. So for the younger folks, tell me about like when they enter the workforce. Before we went on air, we were talking about that, but explain that to the listeners.
Yeah, so here's the reality is I took my first W-2 job at 14 years of age. And I don't know if you remember yours the first time. Now, I worked on the farm before that, but the first time I got paid from someone other than my dad, all right, was at 14 years of age. And it was very common when I was in middle school and high school to get part-time jobs, sweeping the pizza joint out, getting a job at the local mall. My first job off the farm was Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
I actually worked at Chick-fil-A. In fact, I'm on the crew that invented Chick-fil-A sauce.
Oh, wow.
In Fredericksburg, Virginia. Yeah,
and you get part of the royalties, right?
I wish, but Hugh Fleming is the guy that owned the stores. He was the general manager of that store. He owns a couple of them, but he was a great guy. But anyway, I learned a lot there just in leadership skills at an early age. Became a shift leader, as they called it back then. But so I started working early. The average Gen Z, right, those are kids that are basically 24 and less now, their first job is over 5.5 years later than the average baby boomer.
Oh, my.
So they enter the workforce for their very first time 5.5 years later than the folks on this end of the curve, right? And the reason this is important, so if Ron were to push full retirement age 2 years, that means they actually get 3 years less paying in the system than the boomers did, because the complaint is, oh, you're pushing it off on our generation. That is simply not true math. And so you need to understand how all these components work, what generation you're in, and how long you're actually paying into the system. Now, the other thing is, will that solve it 100%? No. If you raise the payroll tax, you could actually get about 50 years solvency by raising the payroll tax. I'm not for it. I'm just telling you the actual numbers are out there. Right now, you pay basically $765 in taxes, and your employer does the same, right, for your payroll taxes, et cetera. The bulk of that 6.2 on each side of that, or 12.4% of your income, is what's funding Social Security. They want to raise that to 16.2. So basically, each of us would have to pay an additional 2%, the employer and the employee, on all earned wages, and that would buy them solvency all the way out to, I believe, 2095 or 2098. I forget, I don't have the number in front of me. But that's a huge tax increase, and that's on every working American, not just those that pay federal income tax. So I don't think that actually gets done, but some combination or means testing. I also want to point out that they've raised the income limit that you pay Social Security up over 30 grand in the last couple of years.
Yes, they have.
So they're getting a lot more money from higher earners, and that's, excuse me, likely the trend that we're going to see continue, I think.
All the more reason to show up at our Social Security Blueprint classes coming up Tuesday, August 1st, and Thursday, August 3rd at 6:30 p.m. Register now so you get your spot secured.
Yep, so make sure you give us a call, 402-369-7777 if you want to attend that class. Man, time is flying. That's all we've got time for this week, Sean. Thanks for stopping in.
Thanks.
All right, Chip, what do we have up next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about housing in retirement. My husband and I are in our early 60s. Our youngest child is headed to college this fall. The nest will be empty. For retirement, we have considered building the home we want in the country, or finding something in the country and modifying it. But we haven't taken any steps toward that. Meanwhile, friends are telling us we had better sell our current home now while we still can get a good price for it. But if we do that, we have to live somewhere until we build or acquire a retirement home. Is there a bridge strategy for this kind of situation?
Well, there can be. So, excuse me, we talk to a lot of retirees and pre-retirees about the idea of downsizing or buying the forever home, so to speak, and getting what you want. Recently just did this, someone who moved down to Arizona, and talking through what that process looked like. So there's a lot that comes out of a question like this. So there's a lot more we would know to give specific answers. But in general, yeah, there are strategies to help people make that bridge. So the question is basically, should we sell our house now? In other words, you know, is this the top of the market? And we just talked about a story where real estate prices could go backwards. Well, that depends on what community you live in, what area. Omaha, in general, weather, we've talked about this many times, one of the best cities in America to weather a recession. And we still have a housing shortage even here in Omaha. So depending upon the house that you have, the neighborhood, and the features to it, you could maybe wait. But yes, are we getting through the edge of this cycle? Probably. The problem is there's less buyers the higher these interest rates go to buy the house if you put it on the market now. And so you have to decide, what would you do if you sold the house? And there's a lot of other factors. Do we owe any money on the house? If we currently have a mortgage, we're gonna net out some proceeds, right? Whether we're paying off a mortgage or not. And are those proceeds enough to go buy this other house we want to buy? And if it's not, then maybe you can rent. And it's not the worst idea to rent for a time period, so that you make sure. Like, I rented the first 2 years I lived in Omaha, right? When we moved here, we did actually put a contract on a house, but once I found out what the property taxes were, after I got off my Pepto-Bismol now, I got out of the contract because I always write it out in my contracts. Yeah. But anyway, and so we decided, let's just rent to make sure before we put down our hard-earned money. And so we chose the rental we did with the school district in mind, because I still had one in school at the time. But then when we bought, you know, I had criteria, my wife had criteria, and we put together and ended up buying the house that we live in. But here in this example, with property taxes being what they are, and with interest rates where they are, it's not the worst idea if you want to sell your house, if it's ready. Now, the other thing is you got to take time to get it ready. You know, spend a few dollars making the curb appeal, because just so you know, 80% of the buying decision is made when they pull in the driveway. if there's something they don't like, I mean, I can tell you, I bought a lot of properties, rental properties. I'll never even go in again. But my wife doesn't matter if curb appeal is not there, she's not going to say yes. So curb appeal, and any realtor, good one, will probably tell you that. But so getting the house ready can take time, and when are you ready to go? And the questioner talks about a kid going to college this fall. The best time to sell houses is in the spring, generally. And depending on how many bedrooms it is, so if it's a larger house and you're gonna be attracting families, they like to buy in early spring so they can move in summer in between school, etc.
Sure.
So it increases the appetite for those days. So there's so many factors that go into that. But if you were to sell the house hypothetically today or next spring, right? Just put that example. Interest rates are staying elevated for a while. So if you have a mortgage still, and your mortgage is, say, 3%, 3.5%, something like that, that's what most people's mortgages are. We're finding that we're talking to you today. And you're going to have to go buy a mortgage at 7.5% where they sit today. You're basically looking at double the payment for the same amount of mortgage. So assuming the person had a mortgage, and we take all the proceeds and put it as a down payment, we buy a like for a like, right? Same amount of money. We're going to have double the payment. Can we stomach that? So is there a bridge strategy? The answer is yes. Wait for the opportunity to find the house you really want. Take those proceeds. You can get treasuries. We could buy T-bills to buy you 26 weeks and get over 5% guaranteed interest from the federal government on your money. And you could use that money. And again, I got to use some hypothetical numbers here to make this make sense. So let's just say the house is worth $600,000 and the person owes $200,000 on it. They have $400,000 in equity. If they took that $400,000, sold it, hypothetically, put the $400,000 in T-bills and earned 5% on that, right? That's $20,000 in guaranteed interest from the federal government. By the way, you don't have to pay state income tax here in Nebraska on that. That $20,000 could rent you a pretty decent apartment. That would, be an $1,600 a month. That would be a pretty nice apartment that the person could rent if they're looking to downsize. While they then shop and they're not losing their cash. They have no risk of principal there, and then go find the home and then purchase it in maybe when they think there's more opportune time. And the other thing is, if you're going to the country, it's not like there's listings every 100 feet. Like certain neighborhoods, obviously there's tons of listings in big suburbs, but in the country it may take a little longer, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's a more specialized choice you're making.
So there's a lot of factors in there, but this is where you just do some actuarial math and kind of, you know what, I'm comfortable if I could sell it today and I could go rent an apartment for the interest I'd earn on my proceeds. That's not a bad strategy as long as you're willing to move into that place. And now you have the expense of moving.
Well, that's intriguing because this question hits eerily close to home. Our nest is emptying out. If I had looked into a crystal ball a year or two ahead and saw my wife and I in an apartment, before you laid all this out, I would have thought, wow, we must have failed. We must have botched it. How did we end up? But no, actually, it could make sense if you're kind of gathering up to set up for your final act in life, your final 20 or so years,
well,
and
again,
where you want to be.
If you're truly empty nesters, I can tell you, I have a almost 5,000 square foot house and we do a lot of entertaining, right? But my wife's already starting to go, I can't wait till we don't have to take care of so much. 3 floors and 2-level deck.
I've been to your home. I bet that's a workout.
It is. It's a lot of stuff. And we talk about, I could live in a maintenance-free condo, and my wife said, could you do it? Well, I'll probably need a garage. There's some things I'd need to go with it, but yeah, I could. So again, everybody's got different flavors and different tastes. It's up to the person what's important to them. But yes, the important takeaway is this is when you sit down with a good advisor, holistic, who will not just talk about the house, but talk about what the proceeds does, the interest, the taxation on the money, the proceeds. Do you have to pay tax on that capital gain? In most examples, no, right? So you could wait. You don't have to be forced to reinvest the dollars. Understanding all this is what makes a good, competent team, and why we use the team approach here at Retire Smart. Got 14 different advisors to help people answer questions just like these.
Another housing question, David, and you alluded to this in the first segment, this kind of situation. My wife and I are in our late 50s. We have about $1 million saved for retirement and plan to retire in our mid-60s. We have 18 years left on our mortgage and are in position to pay it off early, but with a 3% interest rate, maybe that's not a good move. What do you think?
Me think that is not a good move. Now,
stay with that 3%, just keep paying.
You ask my wife, Melissa, she'll give you different advice, different strokes for different folks, right? Now, listen. 3% mortgage, I wouldn't prepay a penalty. I would not prepay a penny, excuse me, not a single penny. You can take the extra cash that you have and earn, as we just talked about, 5% guaranteed right now. So for as long as you can do that, that's a 2% arbitrage in your favor. And by the way, I can get you 5+% guaranteed from either insurance company or the federal government for 5 years right now. No problem. if that's what you want. Okay. So in that example, you could take the cash you're going to have and you earn a 2% arbitrage. And so if this person owed, let's just say they owed $200,000 on that mortgage, and they can earn 2% arbitrage guaranteed for the next 5 years, right? That's $4,000 a year for 5 years. That's $20,000 in cash instead of paying that mortgage off. That then they could pay the mortgage off, which the principal balance would be lower in the future, and they got the $20,000 in their pocket. So again, we look at things from we geek out on the number side of it, but people are emotional. I just want to be debt free, and I understand that's the way my wife is. But that's not a good financial move. We want to help you become the best steward of your capital, right? And sometimes I got to tell people, even they hate it, don't pay that off. Let's do something else with the dollars. Now, don't put them in a risk asset. We still want to have and that's where you can use these treasuries or guaranteed interest rates from insurance companies to buy you that arbitrage right now. That would just not be a good move.
David, this next question plays off your observation you just made about our team approach. It's about our smart process, actually. Questioner says, I enjoy listening to the guest voices of your team of advisors. Just had Sean Swanson on this show. But doesn't that mean there's wide variation in the service you provide? I'm sure everybody is good, but different people have different strengths and weaknesses. When I go to McDonald's, I know I will get the same cheeseburger no matter who prepares it. How do I know I will get the same quality of service at Retire Smart no matter which advisor I get?
Well, this brings up a great point. When I worked for the big box financial outfit, so I was a branch manager of one of the largest national firms out there. I was advisor at old school Wall Street for a long time. It was literally like, if there's 72 advisors in the office, 72 different strategies going on, 72 different ideas of what to do for clients. There was no system. There was no process from the main company. Every one of the advisors on our team here at Retire Smart and Smart Wealth follows the SMART planning process. And we work as a team. You don't have an individual broker like you would if you went to a Merrill Lynch or a UBS or a Morgan Stanley, where that broker, here's my idea. Here, every one of the advisors, whenever they're presenting a strategy, and this is not just on the initial plan, by the way, it's on reviews as well. We have 2 training sessions where the entire team come together every Monday and every Friday, whether it's an annual review with a client, and we're pre-planning 2 weeks out's reviews and what we need to do and what needs to be accomplished to keep the plan going forward in all the different holistic areas we cover. There's 5 key areas, by the way, of a true holistic plan. And especially when we're building out a brand new case for a prospective new client of the firm, we have to present it in front of all the advisors, and they pick us apart. Even me, I'll come up with a couple and I'll get in, someone in the back of the room. There's 14 people in that room saying, hey, have you think about strategy 9 or strategy 34? There's 65 different tax strategies alone that we implement, let alone how to understand risk allocation, asset allocation. So it's a very different process that people go through in our system versus if you just go hire a broker that just happens to be under the name of a national chain, but they're free to autonomy, do what they want. Here, everyone must follow the system. So it's a great question, but no, it's not a different experience. At least it shouldn't be.
You're getting the same smart process no matter what. David, we're out of time for questions this week. If people would like to call us and ask a question, how many openings do we have for a 15-minute conference?
We have 12. I'm excited. We pushed the calendar around a little bit. 12 of those openings. These do get very popular in Philadelphia. You're going to talk with one of the licensed advisors on our team and just ask your most pressing concern. And there's no pressure, no obligation whatsoever. This is just to give you information so you don't have to come in and see us. You can just find out, and we appreciate you listening to the show.
A dozen openings, but they fill up fast. 402-369-7777. No charge, no obligation if you'd like to schedule a 15-minute phone conference with one of our advisors. 402-369-7777. Up next, Bank of America was hit with $250 million in penalty fees. We'll tell you why next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, here's the headline from the Wall Street Journal. Bank of America ordered to pay $250 million over wrongful fees and fake accounts. I didn't think this kind of stuff went on in the big-time financial world, but clearly it does.
Well, do you remember Wells Fargo a few years back? I went through this where they were paying bonuses for account openings, and they were opening accounts, and I had it open. They had the 3 checking accounts open in my name when this happened. They had a massive settlement where apparently the same type of thing is going on, and this is the problem with when these companies are just this big, these behemoths how do they layer it down? How do they incentivize growth within the organization? Well, in the banking world, they usually do it by types of accounts. Open a savings account, open a checking account, because they know the average account, if it gets open, will generate X, Y, Z in fees. And then the other type of account they want to open, of course, is credit card accounts. If you've ever gone to a retail store, hey, would you like to get 30% off today's purchase, and open a credit card with a retailer? They all want to get the credit card open because the credit cards are very, very profitable. And they know at some point you're going to pay fees, interest, or penalties, late fees, et cetera. So what happened here in particular is they were opening tons of credit cards without the client's authorization. And they were just like, oh, we thought it'd be convenient if we opened up a new credit card for you, a Bank of America credit card. And one, this is affecting people's credit history. So, because you're getting what's called an inquiry. If somebody were about to buy a house and this happened, this could disqualify them from a mortgage. So now they were ordered to pay $250 million in fines and fees. But I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, because what's going to happen is people find out they were part of this and it created a problem for their credit, financing a car or something they were trying to do, and this inquiry caused them to pay a higher credit rate. I think there'll be class action lawsuits following something like this. There'll be law firms advertised. But again, I'm not saying anything bad about the particular bank named here, but in general, this is sometimes the experience you're going to get when you go with this gigantic behemoth. And why some people, especially when it comes to their wealth management or their financial planning, we recommend, it doesn't have to be us, by the way, but recommend you use a true holistic planner that's going to look at all the areas of retirement that is an independent and fiduciary based. And by the way, this doesn't mean they can't use insurance products. If you need life insurance or Medicare or something like that, there's some guy on the radio who keeps talking like, oh, if they have an insurance license, they're not a fiduciary. That's simply not true.
Could you define again? I know we've talked about it, but some of our listeners are new to us. What does fiduciary mean?
It means you're legally obligated to do what's in the client's best interest, period. You are obligating yourself to do what you believe to be in their best interest. And when it comes to securities and investment selection, it means you're not going to accept commission for selling those products. But it does not mean that you would not recommend someone have life insurance in place for estate planning or a Medicare supplemental policy to pay their out-of-pocket expenditures. Those are insurance products, and true holistic planning, as it's defined by the Certified Financial Planning Board, includes all of these things. And so therefore, to place those products on a client, you must be licensed under the insurance regulator of the state you operate in, which is some form of insurance license, life insurance, health insurance, et cetera. And so you need to work with somebody who understands this and will disclose this to you. And we do. Like if we have to write a Medicare supplemental, I just explain to the client, we get paid a few dollars every month of your premium. We get compensated for writing this. If you buy a Medicare Advantage plan, if you didn't know, the person writing that policy makes over $600 when they put that policy in force. I'm not a big Advantage fan. You've heard me talk about it. But anyway, these people have to go through training and regulations, so they get compensated, and insurance companies pay them through it. Same thing, your property and casualty. The person that puts the auto insurance on your car or the homeowner's insurance gets compensated. And we have that in-house as well. So, but a true fiduciary is going to do basically, Chip, what is in the client's best interest. And this is the stuff that it bothers me, is these big box retailers that go over and above and start pushing credit cards on the client and other things, and then all these fake accounts. Anyway, not good. Not good for the business. Not good, black eye, if you will.
Not the way you will be treated at Retire Smart. Another Wall Street Journal headline, David: IRS delays new payout rules for inherited retirement accounts. Again, I couldn't tell for sure. Is this good news for people with inherited IRAs?
So when the Secure Act originally passed at the end of 2019, what changed significantly was what's called inherited IRAs. And 3 different times the IRS has put out the rules and changed them.
Very helpful.
Very, very confusing. And now what we thought was settled science, settled on it, they are now trying to propose rules again to change this once again. So here, this is kind of hard to explain on the radio, but in a nutshell, if you inherited an IRA from mom or dad and they happen to pass after January 1st, 2020, you're under these new rules, at least as we currently understand them. And here's the deal. If they pass prior to that date, you're under the old rules, which means you could take lifetime withdrawal. So if you were If you're 50 years old and you inherit your mom's, who's 80s, IRA, you could take a withdrawal each year over your life expectancy, basically. Very small amount of money you could take out of the account. Not really a big drastic change to your tax bill, most likely. And so that was called a stretch IRA, or sometimes called a legacy IRA. And that's what you did most commonly with inherited IRA. After the Secure Act passed, starting in 2020, if your parents passed away, the IRAs have to be depleted within 10 years now. You cannot take it over your life expectancy. And that is still the same. That hasn't changed. And Secure Act 2.0 has been passed 10 years. What changed 3 times already is, do you have to take a required minimum distribution each year during the 10 years? In other words, do you have to take it out over 10 years, or can you wait to the final year? And there's so much confusion about this. And it turns out the rules as they stand today, Chip, if the person you inherited the account from, right, the original account owner, your mom or dad in this example, was already taking required minimum distributions, or RMDs as we call them, they must continue. You have to take a distribution each and every year.
Okay.
Now, it's not 10% of the account, but you'll have to take a
You
a
can't
calculation.
wait and take it as a lump sum at
Right.
the end of the line.
So you take a distribution each year, and then in the 10th year, you have to empty the entire account out. Now,
Okay.
for most people, that's a disaster tax-wise, which is why working with a competent professional is really important. We're going to show you how much to take out each year so that we deplete it over the 10 years with the minimal tax impact to you and your beneficiaries. And then it's a whole other story about an inherited IRA where you have different rules again. Now, if your mom or dad unfortunately passed before they got to require minimum distribution age, before they started having to take it out, you don't have to take an RMD until the 10th year. So you can effectively stay and let it grow for another 10 years in that tax-deferred status. But again, that may or may not be a good thing based on your income and where your income will be in that 10th year. So you need to sit down with somebody who can project what your tax bill will be, which we know will be higher, by the way. Tax rates go up in 2.5 years. So it may behoove you to take it out earlier while you pay lower tax. And if you're younger and you're planning on your career earnings to increase, and most people do if they're in their 30s or 40s, you would definitely want to get that money out now and put it into another vehicle so you don't have to pay higher tax when you're making more money later. So if somebody was making, let's just say they're making $80,000 a year in their career and they're 38 years old, and 10 years from now they're 48, they get promoted twice or something at the company, and they're making $150,000. Well, they just jumped a tax bracket themselves. Then they're going to have to take the entire account inherit balance out, pushing them most likely even higher in the tax bill. So again, this is why you have to have somebody who understands taxation and can forecast and show you with software, we have proprietary software. We can show you your tax bill, at least how it's under current law projected every year, including the tax hikes already on the books for 2026. I know it's confusing, but this is what we do every day.
David, I'm only going to give you about 30 seconds for this one, but I really want to get your take on this headline I saw. I saw a story at MarketWatch. We all need purpose when we wake up in the morning. Finding meaning in retirement leads to happiness and health. I thought of the A in a SMART plan, which stands for advanced planning. Now that refers to estate and legacy planning, but we also love bucket lists at Retire Smart. We want to make sure you're getting the most out of your retirement.
We absolutely do. It's really important that you have some kind of purpose, and that's what's quoted in the article. And there's a gentleman who wrote a book, and his name, I believe, is Richard Leder. He was the author of a book, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? In other words, having purpose is really important, and it's part of our DNA here. We go off and volunteer. We'll be going off volunteering for the Salvation Army here coming up. We were just talking about it in our team meeting this morning. So basically, it's having purpose, and that keeps people happier, which they leave a more fruitful and healthier. That's the real key word there, Chip, healthier retirement. So whether it's bucket list travel, right, or serving others, or doting on your grandkids, this is we talk about perfect day count all the time here in the office. What's a perfect day seem like to you? We can't promise you that's going to happen, but we want to get the plan where you get the most fulfillment out of your life's work and go enjoy. I just did a review this week with a client. They're taking 4 major trips in the next 12 months. They got pent-up demand. They retired right when COVID hit, and now they're making up for it, and it makes me happy. And they're like, are we okay? Yeah, we won't let you overspend. Trust me. You're fine. And so they're going on a couple of really nice world-class trips. I just saw them send me some postcards and really look forward to it. But having purpose in retirement can make you not only happier, it can make you healthier, and it can help you make smarter decisions, and that there's actuarial data to prove that. So listen, have some purpose, and if you don't, come in and talk with one of our advisors. We'll help you understand what makes you really happy, and then devise an actual smart plan to meet those needs.
That's all part of the report card process. Now, if you just want to dip a toe in the water, we've got the 32-page tax guide, or you can call. We've got a dozen openings for a 15-minute phone conference with one of our licensed financial advisors. Now, don't forget about that Social Security workshop coming up, Smart Social Security Blueprint, right here at Retire Smart at the Midwest Learning Center, 6:30 p.m., Tuesday, August 1st, or Thursday, August 3rd. Smart Social Security Blueprint, but we need to know you're coming. 402-369-7777. It's for clients. It's also open to the general public. 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, have a blessed and prosperous week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week.